Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Radhe and I welcome you to the inaugural video of this brand new channel. Here we will be discussing movies, TV shows, comics and everything awesome. And for today's video, I've decided to put forth my breakdown and review of the first episode of the animated series brought to us by the Marvel Studios. Yes, I'm talking about What If, and the first episode was If Captain Carter Were the First Avenger. Although Marvel entered the web series game with WandaVision, but What If is the first animated series produced by the Marvel Studios, which is canon as stated by Kevin Feige, the president of MCU. Before we start the video and enter into the spoilers, I would like to tell you that I really like this episode. I have some worries regarding this episode, but they are diminished by the fact that we can see Steve Rogers again. Let's begin. We are welcomed by the charismatic and deep voice of Jeffrey Wright, who plays the Watcher in this show, although he looks more like Eternity from the comics rather than a Watcher. Speaking of Jeffrey Wright, you have seen him before in movies like Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Mockingjay and in the Daniel Craig Bond movies. I was aware of the casting way before watching the episode and I was impressed with his voiceover. I think people will be hooked to his voice as the Watcher. In Marvel Comics, the Watchers are an extraterrestrial race which are very powerful beings that keeps a watch over the multiverse. The Watcher explains how the multiverse has different versions of stories that we know. These realities are formed due to choices made by characters. This show and all the stories depicted here deal with the choices made and their impacts on the sacred timeline. What's a sacred timeline, you ask? Well, you have to watch Loki to understand that. For the time being, we will treat the MCU timeline as the sacred timeline. So after the brief recap of Captain Rogers' adventures and heroics, which show how he rose to fame as Captain America, we find that in this universe, Peggy Carter takes the decision of staying in room while the serum is administered. Similar to the movie, there's a bombing by Hydra to steal the super soldier serum. The event leads to the death of Dr. Abraham Erskine, voiced by Stanley Tucci. But in this reality, Steve is shot and is unable to go through the chain. And thus we get the what if. When Peggy decides to enter the pod and gets injected by the serum in place of Steve Rogers, Howard Stark helps her do so. Dominic Cooper from the first Captain America movie returns as Howard Stark for this show. In the aftermath of the experiment, Colonel John Flynn, voiced by none other than Bradley Whitford, who famously played the dad of Jake Peralta in the popular show Brooklyn Nine-Nine, objects at the involvement of a woman in military operations. The now jacked up Peggy Carter goes on a mission to stop the Tesseract from reaching the Hydra headquarters. However, Stark helps by providing her with the suit designed for her and of course, yes of course, the shield with a Union Jack in the center of it. We witness a stunning battle and Peggy uses her newfound powers for the first time. The soldiers of Hydra are no match to her super strength. The visuals here are simply mind-blowing and you'll definitely crave for more. Peggy returns victorious after capturing the Tesseract and Arnim Zola. She then gets promoted to Captain and dons the title of Captain Carter after freeing Bucky Barnes and the Howling Commandos from the grasp of Hydra. Steve calling her Captain Rogers will definitely remind you the Captain America First Avenger scene when Barnes does the same for Captain America. I would have loved if she was called Captain Britain, but that's my personal opinion. Comment if you wanted the same. Although the story follows the same path as the first Captain America movie, but you'll notice the differences like Steve Rogers manning the Hydra Stomper, which resembles the early Iron Man suit. Peggy and Rogers hinting towards their budding romance without any jealousy. Sebastian Stan and Neil McDonough reprise their roles from previous MCU movies and do well with what they have got. Back to the story, we see Peggy fighting the Hydra troops with the help of Steve Rogers and Colonel John Flynn taking credit of all the victories, like any pompous brat we know of. Red Skull is the central antagonist here as well, but this time he decides to bring an intergalactic beast which looks like the Shumagorath monster from the comics that destroys galaxies. Ross Marquand reprises his role from Avengers Infinity War and Endgame as Red Skull. Personally, I would say that I liked John Keaton in the role of Steve Rogers, but you'll definitely miss the original Steve Rogers voice. Following the footsteps of the movie, Peggy and the team tries to stop the train in the mountains. Only this time, the intel suggests that the Red Skull is on the train. The train turns out to be a trap and Steve presumably dies in the explosion on the train. And the avalanche makes us guess that maybe Steve will be the Winter Soldier of this reality. But that doesn't happen. A distraught Peggy interrogates Zola and finds about the plans of Red Skull. The team decides to stop Red Skull and honor Steve's memories by putting themselves in line of fire if anything goes wrong. The show hits a good sentimental spot at this point, reminding us what the story of Steve Rogers has always been about, putting the safety and wellness of others and his country above all of his personal happiness. Red Skull powers his machine using the Tesseract extracted from the Hydra Stomper, and the monster arrives. The monster arrives at the facility and instantly kills an overly joyous Red Skull. Steve arrives at the scene in the Hydra Stomper powered by the generator, but only with a limited power in the armor. He rescues everyone but eventually fails to save Peggy, who sacrifices herself in order to send the monster back. In the future, at the Project Pegasus facility of S.H.I.E.L.D., Captain Carter arrives and is greeted by Nick Fury and Clint Barton, both with original voices from the movie cast. They inform her that the war has been won. With no mid-credits and post-credits scenes, the episode ends with the monologue of the Watcher. Now here's the review. It was directed by Bryan Andrews, who has previously worked with MCU as a storyboard artist, and I believe he delivers the vision of a multiversal world quite brilliantly. I love the voice cast. Characters are mostly played by actors who have portrayed the roles at the big screen before. The overall performance is satisfying. AC Bradley, who has worked on Troll Hunters and Arrow, has brought an above-average story to the board, but the voice cast uplifts the story and makes it worth a watch. You can easily distinguish this episode from the movies, but I would have preferred a little more punch in the story. Hopefully it adds something important to the future MCU projects. The sounds and visuals are up to the mark, and use of earlier themes helps us to bond with the characters. All gripes aside, the show has a lot of Easter eggs and references to the first Captain America movie. It also taps on the multiverse issue we have right now in the MCU, and it may have introduced a Doctor Strange villain to the MCU fans. Do tell me in the comments what did you like or dislike about this episode. And if you liked the video, a like, share and subscribe would be very helpful. See you soon. Cheers.